I've been to so many fairs and even museums and overheard people say, young people with their friends saying, all of this stuff is stolen, all of this stuff is looted. And I think that's coming from sort of a strong element in the cultural discourse. And I think we need to work on changing that perception. Now, it doesn't mean whitewashing the past.
Chaque objet d'art a une histoire à raconter. Une histoire qui devient un mythe qui devient légende. Bienvenue sur Rosantico, le podcast qui explore le marché de l'art et ses coulisses. Découvrez les histoires inspirantes des femmes et des hommes, experts, galéristes, collectionneurs, qui agissent à l'unisson pour rendre ce secteur vibrant et riche en découvertes, avec l'amour et la passion pour l'art et la beauté qui les guident au quotidien. Partez pour un voyage unique, où la tradition et l'expertise se mêlent aujourd'hui à l'innovation et à la technologie, où des nouveaux enjeux sociétaux et juridiques rebattent les cartes du secteur et redéfinissent l'essence même du collectionnisme au XXIe siècle. Je m'appelle Bornas Kognamillo, je suis le PDG et fondateur de Méditerranée, et ça, c'est Rosantico.
Lillian Barlett Stoner. Hi.
Hi, Borna.
How are you doing?
Very well. Nice to virtually meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so glad having you today on our podcast, Rosantico. I'm very happy to have with us a professional dealing with the antiquities art domain. And I'm so happy that we'll be talking about many subjects concerning this topic and also say more broadly concerning the art market. And the first question is, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So yes, I'm Lily. My friends call me Lily. I was born in Canada, raised in Boston, and now I live in France. I live in the Vosges with my husband and little poodle. I like everything classical antiquity, and I have a very bad taste in music that I inflict on Instagram from time to time.
Excellent. Thank you, Lily. And also, can you tell us what sparked your interest in ancient art and antiquities? How did you get started in this field?
Well, compared to, I think, other people in the field, maybe I came to it a bit late in life. As a North American, I wasn't really surrounded by classical antiquity growing up, but I was totally history obsessed. And so when I went into college, I was pretty sure I was going to study early modern European history. And I was really interested in the stories, and the personal details, salacious gossip, things like that. But in college, I was required to take a foreign language class, a year of foreign language. And instead of doing something useful like German or French or Italian, I did ancient Greek. And from there, I was pretty much a goner. I took a couple of classes in classical archaeology, switched majors completely, and then sort of did everything I could to follow that trajectory.
Okay, nice. Could you tell us more about your career?
So I went to Harvard undergrad and majored in classical archaeology. I had some great advisors. And one of them was David Gordon Mitten, who's sort of super old school. So he was very interested in the art market. He was the curator of the Sackler Museum, and he was acquiring all the time. And so that made an impact on me. And also, so pretty early on, I was involved in archaeological projects, both in Athens, in Turkey, in Sicily. And I kept that up over the 10 years or so I was in school, more than 10 years maybe. And that had a huge impact too. I mean, it's hard to explain to people who haven't excavated. I know you have in Egypt. First of all, there's something so rational and logical that really appealed to me. I mean, things fall apart, they're buried, and when you uncover them, there's a really appealing logic, but also a huge sense of responsibility. You're very aware that you're uncovering these layers and these objects, and you better figure out pretty quickly what it's all about while you're doing it and record it, because otherwise it's lost. And I think also there's something sort of holy about finding material and holding it in your hands. But in any case, I went through my MA and PhD, totally focused on classical archaeology. And I would say something rubbed me the wrong way about academia. I always thought I'd be a professor, and then, little by little, I started to change my mind. Somehow, without being rude, I found the approach a bit navel-gazing. Like the audience you're going to reach is so limited, and so wasn't for me. But when I was working on my dissertation, so the PhD part, I had the opportunity to work at the Met in the Greek and Roman department in a big part of a big loan exhibition about Hellenistic art, which is really my favorite. And that had a huge impact too on how kind of I saw things. I saw the inner workings of museums. I kind of understood what they were about. And being part of a big international loan exhibition really got me thinking about international cooperation and the things that were really possible.
Right, exactly. All these experiences brought you today to who you are. So can you tell us more about your activity?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that after working at the museum, I took a job working for an art gallery in Basel, a well-known dealer in Basel. So that was the last 5 years of my life. And I decided to leave to start my own thing. And I'm calling that project Agoraia. I chose the name, obscure Greek name. You basically have to have an obscure Greek name. Because Agoraia, Agoraios, that's the epithet used to describe the deities of the Agora. So the gods and goddesses overseeing sort of exchange of ideas, exchange of goods, displays of images. So I want to kind of cover the whole base. I don't really believe in or accept the sort of recent divide between academia and trade. And I want to kind of do all of the things. Yeah, so that's sort of my viewpoint and what I'm trying to kind of go towards.
Excellent. And I can say that you are doing it pretty well. I met you virtually through your Instagram page, and it corresponds to what you say about your values and your targets, your goals of how you spread the knowledge and the awareness of antiquity and ancient art.
I started it when before I started my own thing, and I just missed the artworks, and I've always been sort of object focused. So for me, I miss thinking about the ancient artworks, and I think everything has something interesting about it. And so kind of finding that kernel is really entertaining for me anyway.
Absolutely. And speaking about your experience in an important art gallery, what does collecting art mean for you today, and especially antiquities?
I can't speak as a collector myself. I don't really collect ancient art yet. And I didn't grow up with this sort of environment. I think harshly as an American, it's not so entrenched, the tradition of collecting as it is in Europe, which is a shame. But I think what I've learned, even before I worked for the gallery, so in the last 10 years, is that people who collect ancient art are really passionate about it. They do it because they love it. They either love the history, they love the aesthetics. But I think, especially antiquities, it is a niche field. It's really stayed like that. And I think the people who do collect are truly passionate about it. They're not buying things necessarily as investments or things like that. They could be good investment, but I don't think that's the main drive.
And do you see any difference in terms of population collecting behaviors between antiquities and other forms of art, like modern or even contemporary art, which is more hype, more expensive, more everything today?
I think there are a bunch of different types of collectors, and I think kind of the more hardcore traditional antiquities collectors are hyper-focused on that as their goal. And I think even if they come into it as generalists interested in a big swath of antiquities, I think they quickly narrow themselves down to different types of objects or different periods, and that happens pretty naturally. But I think there's also something to be said for collectors who are aware that they're going to be living with their art. So they might collect contemporary art, they might collect, some Asian art, but they're aware that they're living with it. So they have to aesthetically, something has to speak to them about it, has to work with their environment. And I don't think those collectors should be poo-pooed. I think they're a valuable part of the art market, and what they're doing is interesting. And I think some galleries and dealers are more oriented to helping that type of dealer. It's more build a lifestyle. And I think that's interesting to watch too.
And you know also why I'm speaking about this point, because it's a funny story. When I was starting working for some art galleries, I was seeing all the people entering, so opening the door of the gallery, and it was all, let's say politely, seniors, or sometimes very senior people. And I was just asking, the art dealer, the gallery owner, saying, how do you deal with, new publics, young people? And he said, oh, this is not stuff for them. Like, he was very sharp. And I was very, very, shocked, and say, okay, maybe there is a way of bringing new generations to archaeology, which is not just simple, nice, old stuff. But there is plenty of story, but there is plenty of myth, legends, and history behind an object.
Right. And weird stuff. I mean, yeah, it's all fun. I mean, even fragments and things are terribly fun. I wish there were more young collectors and new collectors. I think every single dealer does, because they want to have a new and thriving clientele. I think there's a problem with perception with the antiquities market now, and I think it's something we could discuss. I think I've been to so many fairs and even museums and overheard people say, young people with their friends saying, all of this stuff is stolen, all of this stuff is looted. I mean, I think that's coming from sort of a strong element in the cultural discourse. I mean, the New York Times every month is having something about little old ladies who have, been looting, tchotchkes and things like that. And I think it's a real disservice to our field. And I think we need to work on changing that perception. Now, it doesn't mean whitewashing the past. I mean, the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s were, bad things happened in our field. And I think there were some unscrupulous dealers and people were totally ignoring the cultural heritage laws, export laws. But I think that's changed. And I think people can be more and more comfortable buying ancient art from dealers, because the reality is it's bad business to be selling art that isn't sort of above board. I think most dealers are making huge efforts to do so, because bad publicity and legal problems are the last thing they want. So I think people can be more and more comfortable doing so.
There is, this debate. Can we rewrite history? Can we judge what happened 50 or more years ago? That's a huge point that we can't solve snapping our fingers, but it maybe deserves a better debate, a better exchange between parties, which I fear lacks cruelly today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. And I think, and that's why you've seen this recent divide between academics and the art market. I think there are a lot of factors at play, but the increasing perception that something is illegal or unethical to collect is new. I mean, this is, if we're looking in the last century, it is a new thing. And so I think the regulation in general is good. And I think dealers are doing everything they can to toe the line. It's not always realistic, because if you look at how things were collected in the 70s, 80s, 90s, people were doing so not keeping invoices. They weren't looking at export laws, and they were just collecting for their pleasure mostly. And I think that's created problems that we can't solve, but we have to figure out a way to rectify those problems. Yeah, I think the regulation has probably had the good advantages of slowing down looting, which I think everyone can agree is tragic. That's a really bad thing. But I think it's going a bit too far. The reality for our field is that I wish more people understood is that it doesn't need more fresh material. There's so much in circulation. antiquities, it's operating like the old masters or impressionist market. I mean, there's no need to have fresh material. There's really enough. I think what dealers are encountering more and more is that there's a lack of documented provenance, even for completely legitimate material. And that's a real shame. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of talk about how quickly that's changed in the last 15 years, really. I went to school in New York. My Institute of Fine Arts was largely funded by these big collectors, Shelby White among them. These people were buying big collections. They were spending money. There were better investments for them to have made if they were just looking to expand their wealth by collecting. My God. What used to happen with these grand old American collections, and I was speaking mostly as an American because that's kind of my background, is that you made an important collection, you had it published by the leading authorities, and you willed it to a museum after you died because you felt like you needed to give back and have these things enter the public domain that way. And so I think the real downside to what's happening in the U.S. in particular is because museums can no longer accept antiquities after 1970 or loans with rolling deadlines or whatever, that those things will never enter the public domain that way. But even worse, I think in the U.S., the problem is 1970 has become such a bright line for academics that increasingly they won't publish material that doesn't have a 1970 documented provenance. And that to me is totally ludicrous, because how can you be scientific if you're ignoring such a huge swath of this material? So I think there needs to be pushback about that attitude. It doesn't mean that there needs to be, mayhem and irresponsible collecting and open borders or anything like that, not at all. But I think it needs to calm down a bit, because what's happening now with this witch hunt, as you say, with very aggressive prosecutors and sort of concerted effort on the part of so-called forensic archaeologists to find things that are in naughty dealers' archives from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. The problem is it's not really accomplishing anything positive. I really wonder, I think if we could bring down the political tenor and the sort of political correctness too, I wonder who really is interested in repatriation. I mean, looking at some of these pictures of these, the repatriation pictures that happen with the carabinieri posing near them, some of this material is not interesting for the Italian museums to possess. It just isn't. I mean,
we should talk about every single case and see.
Yeah, they're all different.
Exactly. And that's the problem.
I think Italy is one of the more sensible ones. And the Carabinieri and the TPC and all of that, I think they have almost a pragmatic approach. But I wonder if sometimes the actions of the American prosecutors, I mean, just one, but let's say many, I wonder if it's almost the tail wagging the dog. I mean, once these things are brought to the Carabinieri's attention, is then the pressure for them to take everything back. Whereas I think I've known cases of some university museums where before there was so much media attention brought to these items from bad dealers that there could be reciprocal agreements made more easily with the Italians, with the Greeks. And I wish that could be the way going forward, because it seems to me that we're losing the goal here. There's no really defined goal. I mean, whether we want to take, obviously there are no Greek and Roman antiquities in North America from the ground. So if we want to give everything back that has violated some sort of an export agreement, then...
we were talking about some other guests, and we all agreed on one thing, that art is a bridge between people, civilizations, cultures. And if you cut bridges, if you cut the exchanges, there is no dialogue possible. There is no way we can understand each other, especially from different cultures, ethnicities, and nations.
I don't think it's all negative. I think that there are some really positive opportunities to kind of just take it down a notch and really try to articulate what the goal is. And I think that there are rational people on every side of the debate. One of the biggest stumbling blocks that I've seen with people I've talked to who aren't related to the field are that it's ethically wrong to own culturally important or historically important artworks. And I think that's the hardest thing to fight. But that has to do sometimes with a lack of knowledge or a lack of thinking about kind of the world more broadly, I think. But that's one of those hard ones.
In your opinion, so how do you foresee the future of the sector? Are we all doomed? Are there going to be new generations of art dealers? Or
no, I don't. I think it's an exciting new world, and I think technology is making it way more exciting because I think the more awareness and the more, I hesitate to say transparency because I don't know what transparency of what. I mean, but I think awareness and even ways of showing how much is out there and how much it's valuable, even if it's separated from its archaeological context. I think those are really important things. And I'm interested to talk to you about what you're up to because I've been dreaming for about 10 years of some sort of database that collectors can upload their material safely to show it, just to kind of get it out of the darkness into the light, so to speak. I mean, there has to be some sort of a tipping point where people say, "Oh, hold on. I mean, the scale of the problem, if it's a problem, or the scale of art we're just turning a blind eye to is so big. There has to be some push forward." And so I think that would be something exciting, just to, yeah. And even if it didn't change public perception in our generation, then at least this information wouldn't be lost. And that would be, I think that's one of my biggest fears too. And people talk a lot about the orphan antiquities problem. Terrible word. No one likes the word, but it's kind of a useful one. So objects that don't have clear provenance before a certain cutoff date. And what do you do with them? And I think that's something our generation really needs to solve, or at least come up with a plan to protect these things or their information soon. And it's so doable. It's so doable.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And talking about technology and digital means, today you are at the forefront of the social media and the usage of digital tools to enhance the awareness and knowledge of antiquities. So your Instagram page, for me, it's a nice starting point because my question is, how can social media play a role in spreading the knowledge of ancient art as it is and in the future?
Good question. Well, I mean, as I said, I just started it sort of for my own entertainment. But what I've noticed is people are really curious. I mean, I think there's a much broader audience of educated people who just don't know. They've never thought much about ancient history. They've never thought about why it might be interesting to them. And I think that's what's really struck me. Even my own family, my parents, I mean, educated people who have known what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And it's like, I had no idea that, all sorts of things. Other information related directly to the object or the culture or how it was used, or even how things were entering museums 150 years ago. All of this is sort of interesting to people. And I think Instagram, I don't really know how to do TikTok and all of those other things, but I think Instagram, at least, it's democratizing. It can really get things out to curious people easily. And I think that's a major benefit. I have a collector who I advise, who said something just like that. He's fairly new collector. The last 5 years really started. And he said, the more I know, the more I love it. The more I know, the more I want to know more. And I think that it I don't know if it's unique to ancient art, but it definitely applies, because really the more you know, the more interesting it is. I went to museums as a kid, and the ancient Greek and Roman departments were the most boring to me because it's like, marble naked people, okay, pretty beautiful, but it's so much more. That's why people who really get into it become obsessed. Collectors or art historians or...
One question that I had in mind was, are art galleries, especially antiquities, art galleries using social medias properly beyond just posting nice picture? All these galleries, they have very similar Instagram profiles with a set of images, very nice pictures. But yeah, you like it, nice. And the next page resembles to the other one. And
I've noticed the same thing about dealers and galleries too. Some have huge followings. I mean, the Gallery Chanel, for instance, because they're showing beautiful interiors, and I quite like what they do. But others are kind of showing, I mean, their current stock. Yeah, one wonders whether something could be done a bit more creatively there. I don't think they invest a lot of time or money in it. I think still my perception, and it's very limited based on who I worked with. I think the main thrust of getting new clients, they're going to fairs, and I think these fair participation will help. And I might make me unpopular, and I liked going to fairs, but I don't really think it's a model that's maybe the most useful. I think it's a very conservative field, and the dealers are trying to keep doing what the previous generation did. But I think so much is changing, and I think maybe the fairs are maybe not the most cost-effective way to get new clients. Is my perception. I also wonder if dealers don't like to expose their stock too broadly online. They don't want to burn it. They don't want too many people to have seen it. So there might be that kind of lingering in the back of their minds too. I don't know if you've noticed in the art market. It seems to me that the auction houses have a real advantage now that they didn't necessarily 10 years ago. And I think that's something that's happening because of technology. Everything is just so accessible to people, whereas maybe dealers were the main buyers in auctions 20 years ago. I think it's totally reversed. And I think that's a huge change that I wonder how they'll grapple with going forward.
Absolutely. And I also maybe see a kind of unfair advantage that auction houses, especially the biggest ones, have today. So they are developing really hugely the private sales sector. So they are becoming themselves a gallery, an art gallery.
Which is logical somehow. It is. I mean, it would scare me as a dealer. Yeah. This technology can be, I mean, I think what's interesting is people are always looking now. People are looking online for themselves, and it shows that there's an audience for more and more ancient artwork to be exposed that way. So that's a good thing.
That's a very good thing. And that's why I think you have a really bright future in front of you, because we are in huge need of people like you that through your channels can, attract and develop new audiences. I was looking at a video from 10 years ago from a modern art gallery. And the owner was saying, we are participating to this fair here, to TEFAF, and then to BRAFA, and then to New York, and then to Pan Amsterdam, and then here and there. And the purpose of all that was, she was saying, we have to be everywhere, because otherwise we can't sell anymore. We have to be anywhere. I'm not pretty sure it's going to work today with a limited means.
Right, unless you have a very energetic, huge staff. I think it's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I think we need to see the shift through your services, and also what we are doing at Rosantico is really trying to create new engagements, a new momentum, and hopefully it will be useful for the general purpose.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, Lily, I thank you very much for your time and your availability.
Great. Thanks so much for it. It was very nice to meet you. Hope to talk more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Merci d'avoir écouté cet épisode jusqu'au bout. S'il vous a plu, n'hésitez pas à noter Rosantico avec 5 étoiles sur votre plateforme de podcast préférée. Cela nous aide énormément à le diffuser et à faire grandir notre audience. Rosantico est un podcast produit par Winkelmann & Co. société spécialisée dans les services innovants à destination des professionnels du marché de l'art. Si vous voulez en savoir plus, connectez-vous sur www.winkelmann.co. Merci et à bientôt.